August 2019, an image of actor Johnny Flynn is revealed to the public. Flynn is in character for the latest film he's set to star in, Stardust. The role? Why, he's none other than the British rock god himself, David Bowie. What might have been exciting news for Bowie fans immediately went south when it was revealed that the film did not have approval from Bowie's estate, meaning they would be unable to perform any actual Bowie songs within their Bowie biopic. Meant to debut at the Tribeca Film Festival in 2020, the film was graciously delayed its debut thanks to the heroic efforts of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the novel coronavirus merely delayed the inevitable. The film debuted 6 months later at the San Diego International Film Festival and released in theaters shortly afterwards. Today, it boasts a 19% fresh score on Rotten Tomatoes. 2 years prior to the announcement of this flop film, rock and roll documentarian Brett Morgen had already been hard at work on a Bowie film of his own, a documentary, and it had the approval of the Bowie estate. In fact, Morgan was working so hard that on January 5th, 2017, he suffered a near-fatal heart attack while on the job and spent a week in a coma. Morgan attributes the heart attack to years of smoking, stress, and a lack of exercise. But give any Bowie fan what Morgan had, access to roughly 5 million Bowie archival items, including footage, photographs, paintings, and more, and they may well have a heart attack from sheer excitement. First reported on in 2021, Morgan's Bowie doc premiered at the 2022 Cannes Film Festival, where it received positive reviews. A theatrical release followed in September of that year, and at least 3 Bowie heads went to press their space faces as close to the screen as they could. That's right, we're talking Brett Morgen's Moonage Daydream on Bowie Me. That's right, it's Bowie Me, the only podcast that usually compares famous Bowie-related songs to their many covers to find out which one will lay the real thing on me. But this week, we're reviewing a Bowie documentary. I'm your host, as always, The Snake, joined by my far-out co-host...
Alex Mildenberger.
Alex Mildenberger, how you doing?
Oh, I'm still doing good, man. We just talked about this.
Alex, come on. It's technically January when people are hearing this.
Okay, well, it's cold outside. It's snowy, probably. That's how I'm doing. Cold and snowy.
It's cold and snowy. Crazy thing is, King Charles is dead.
Wow. Yeah, well, I was shocked too. How about Chuck 3?
Chuck 3. Yeah, great, Alex. Good future comedy. We're always on top of that. Very excited today. First time guest on show, longtime friend, big Bowie fan. Ladies and gentlemen, people who aren't defined by those words, give it up for Ronald Chang.
Hello. Hi,
hello,
everybody.
Ronald. How's it going, Ronald? Doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. I've always been excited to finally get a chance to come on and chat about Bowie.
Hell yeah. It's funny that we were getting you on to talk about a movie, because I recall we were having some conversation about music once, and you just like offhandedly were like, yeah, I like to listen to songs like a lot and pick out the different pieces that I couldn't really hear before and like analyze the lyrics. I'm like, how have we not had Ronald on the show? That's literally exactly what we do on here.
So those it's not something I guess I talk about too much either. It's just something that I do on my own when I listen to music, and I guess, I never really seek out anybody else to go chat with it. I'm just like, yeah, these are conclusions I have about the piece. And then I move on. So. And
then you're satisfied with that. Well, We're not. We have to broadcast it to literally hundreds of people.
Oh, hundreds. Great. I am glad to be getting my audience out there.
Trip digits, buddy. So yes, welcome. Excited to have you here. Just to start off, people have heard, obviously, about, because every year rather, we do a month of Bowie-themed content, because Alex and I are big Bowie heads. And I think our origin story on being Bowie fans here, correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, is that we started listening to it in high school and then just like listened to a bunch of it.
Yeah, that's about it.
I just remember we used to sit in our musical theater class, and instead of doing any work on our things, we'd just talk about like the rise and fall of Ziggy Stardust. And be like, what do you think the album's about, man?
What does it mean?
What does it fucking mean?
It's about like the death of something, man.
So that's our story. Ronald, when did you start getting into David Bowie?
I would say it's kind of related to you guys as well here. When we were definitely younger and we would get together and play Rock Band, I think A Suffragette City was one of the first songs of David Bowie that I heard. from the classic Rock Band 1, and just like it just stuck with me. I think like it was a combination of, all four of us like getting together to play a game like this that's almost just like kind of rocking out. But it was just like such a enjoyable song here. It kind of had me dive into music a little bit, especially into Bowie's music a bit. And back at that age when I was finding new music, I would kind of just find the entire album, and then just kind of spread out from there.
Yeah.
And so I think like early on, I definitely listened to a lot more of it, but I think a good portion was before my kind of music taste solidified to really appreciate a lot more of some of his earlier stuff. But I definitely got into, I think, Ziggy Stardust very, very early on, and just became one of my favorite albums listening to as like my music tastes developed through high school as well. But yeah, just kind of listening to it throughout high school and coming into more and more of his work.
Yeah, it's basically our story as well, and that's formative times for music taste, right? You hear something in high school and it just becomes your music taste.
Yeah, you read into the lyrics once, think it applies into your actual life, and then that becomes your personality for the next few weeks.
Exactly. And I feel like that, what you just said, like this music applies to my personal life specifically, is a very like specific phenomenon amongst Bowie fans in particular. I think a lot of Bowie fans think they are the biggest Bowie fan because it's just like, it's all about me, bro. Like I connect so strongly to this bizarro British man, and then it becomes like a defining trait. And that's kind of part of like the Bowie madness. I mean, we're talking about the documentary today. There's a lot of shots dedicated to that fan base where you see people in the face paint. There's a girl who's like crying because she like didn't get to see him come out the back door or some shit.
Like they said he was going to be out the back door, but he isn't.
She's like, I've been here for like an hour or so. It was like a crazy amount of time.
Yeah, and then her friends immediately come over and said, I think they like touched him or something. But yeah, it's a lot of obsession, which I never realized there was really that much about him at the time too, having not really experienced the kind of heyday of his fame.
Yeah, we were really in the aftermath. Like, he had stopped touring by the time I had started getting into his music.
Same here.
And yeah, so it was, and then of course I thought he was going to come back, and then he actually left. He said, no, I'm done with Earth out here.
Unfortunately.
So that my question to you, Ronald, is do you think you're the biggest Bowie fan? And also, how dare you?
I don't know if I'd have to say I'm the biggest Bowie fan, but I would certainly say from that kind of era of music, Bowie is one of my top artists, just from that genre, from that idea, and just from the work he's developed and kind of the influences you can see in modern and kind of more modern day artists and onwards. It's just something that I think has always been there. It's just something that I really, really enjoy.
Yeah, 100%. My partner Greta was talking. She was like, I'm trying to think of like artists aside from obviously Lady Gaga who are influenced by Bowie. And I like sat with that and I was like, well, it's like every musician.
There's
like,
so many.
Like, in the same way that the Beatles are like so formative, it's like Bowie is also that formative for a lot of musicians.
Yeah, I would say like in the sense that the Beatles kind of drove a very traditional style of music. I think the David Bowie really kind of pushed the envelope on like what can we consider as like recognizable, acceptable. Where can we basically go with music and still have something that's, unique and interesting?
Yeah, he really does push like this sort of alt side of like popular music where it's not quite the mainstream, but it is still catchy. It's still like popular and enjoyable in that sense.
Yeah, in a way that, I mean, has spoken to a lot of people. I know, like, you can kind of trace the lineage of David Bowie through, like, later in the 70s with, like, punk and also, like, some electronic stuff and, like, new wave and that, forward to today.
Yeah, and even looking at, it's funny because you can see, Bowie's influence in those things and also the music he does, which spans so many genres itself.
Sure.
We've talked previously on the show about how like fickle he is as like a person. Sometimes he's like, yeah, it's all about rock and roll. He's like, actually, rock and roll sucks.
Yeah.
It's dead. And you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I can see how he would jump around so much here. And having been somebody who enjoyed his music before, I never really saw how much he moved between different art styles and ways of expression, which I think this movie has done a great job of kind of showcasing as well.
Yeah, this movie, and let's bring that in here. Moonage Daydream, very different in terms of how like a documentary is formed, and does a really good job of show don't tell, I guess. But before we jump into that, let's talk about documentaries in general. Now, Ronald and I were talking a bit before. Ronald, you said you're not a big documentary watcher.
No, I don't really get a chance to watch too many of them. It's in a sense that I feel when I do find something I'm interested about, I will end up doing my own research into something. I will end up kind of just finding my own conclusions. And then documentaries in my mind end up as like sort of secondary media that I can use for like additional information, but it never really crosses my mind first as something I end up watching.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like to pace my own research, and being able to read as opposed to watch allows me to, I think, get a better flow going in terms of that. Now, Alex, are you a big documentary guy?
I do like informational like content of that sort, but I don't really seek documentaries out all that much.
Okay.
I enjoy them though, but yeah, just don't, because I'm like, do I want to spend the time watching this whole documentary on this thing? And usually the answer is no. But I don't know why. That's my conclusion. But I like documentaries, especially like I remember like probably the most documentaries I've watched would be in like class in school, and those are interesting. Sometimes RoboCop is in them.
Hang on, what? What were you watching?
He like narrated some like Roman history.
As
a series
RoboCop?
Of, no, not as RoboCop.
Okay.
It was I'm blanking on his name though. What's his name?
I don't know the actor's name offhand.
Peter Weller. Yeah, he's also like he has a PhD in history or something like that.
Of course.
Like, yeah. I don't know if it's PhD. Yeah, PhD in something in history. So yeah, he like narrated this series of documentaries on some history stuff, and I watched some Roman ones in a class one time. I was like, "Is that RoboCop?" And it was. But you don't always have RoboCop. But yeah, I do like documentaries. I just don't watch a lot of them.
You just don't watch a lot of them.
But that's the same. I say the same thing about movies. I'm like, oh, I love movies. Do you watch movies? No.
No. I don't have time for that. It raises a question, Alex, because I found a lot of documentaries in this current era are docuseries, rather.
True.
Where it's longer overall, but cut typically into smaller pieces. Some of them are still like hour and a half long episodes each, but it's typically like an hour each. Is that more palatable to you, knowing that it's smaller segments, or less palatable because you know you got to commit to 3 to 6 episodes?
Yeah, if it's an hour long, I would say per episode, I would say less palatable.
Okay.
Although if they were even shorter, I'll watch it for 6 hours straight.
Yeah, that's facts. Yeah, you're like,
30-minute episode. I'm like, I'll watch 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah, sure. Then I'll watch another one. Then I'll watch another one. Then I'll watch another one. He has a PhD in Italian Renaissance art history.
Oh, okay, fantastic, Alex. So yeah, we're not big doc heads, but typically when I watch documentary, what I'm expecting is like a bunch of talking heads. You talk to people who worked with this, whatever the subject was, be it a person or an event.
Yeah, and sometimes a narrator.
We drop most of that in this documentary to focus primarily on like footage of Bowie and narration from Bowie.
Yeah, it's I don't know if I'd say it's loose, because it's still like a documentary, presents that footage in a way that suggests a story. And I think it does a pretty successful job of that.
Yeah.
Because it really does tell a story, I think. I think it does. And I say I think it does because I don't know how much of the blanks I'm filling in with my own knowledge, because I am fairly knowledgeable about the subject.
Yeah,
and I suspect
me as well.
You are as well. I don't know, Ronald, you said you were less familiar with maybe some of the history. Is that true?
Yeah, like I'm familiar with Bowie's like musical work, but I think that was kind of the limits of really where I knew him as a artist, but I don't think I really think I could say I knew Bowie as the person. And so seeing the documentary, seeing kind of just, all the different places he traveled, kind of the inspiration on why he decided to travel and like what he felt was the art forms he wanted to express himself in. I really wasn't aware that Bowie did so much art and drawing in just other forms. From watching the documentary here, it seemed like that he had quite a bit of writings as well, and I think I'd want to see if I could find those, just kind of read what his thoughts were.
Yeah, he's truly a multimedia artist, and we focus on the music because it was the biggest part.
Yeah,
but like you said,
a
generalist, also, right?
That's right, a generalist. So yeah, that's some of the big highlights of it. Its strength is also its weakness in that it uses just like Bowie footage, and you get real nice little peeks into who he was, or at least who he was when he was being interviewed.
Yeah, and what he was presenting as.
But then in terms of things that I expect from a documentary, like delving into the heaps of cocaine he was doing in the 70s, it just kind of alludes to that. Where you get the interview where he's shaky and a little like he's purely like coked out, and like because I've seen that interview before and I've seen things about it.
Yeah, and you see the like one interview he did where he's like drinking milk, and you're like, oh, I know at that point in his career he was only drinking milk and eating peppers or whatever.
That's right.
And it's like, but they don't go into that, you know. It's just presenting kind of the media at the time, which kind of makes sense because David Bowie was so based around like this idea of pop and like media and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit meta in that way.
And that's actually something I didn't know, like through the movie, without having heard about it through, I guess, like this kind of discussion here, was that I saw him drinking the milk, but I definitely just kind of wrote that off as a sort of, David Bowie was a little bit of a weird guy, and in the sense that you talk about the drug use, and I'm certain drug use was rampant back then, but it's never even expounded upon in the movie. It's never even anything that gets brought up, and I'd have to imagine, for something that is sanctioned by the Bowie estate in the first place, that's probably one of their stipulations on not wanting that type of message through the film,
Mm-hmm. But it is, like, heavily implied. They do a lot of, like, implications of it. And in those scenes where they're showing him, like, a little unstable, like, the music's a little rough, and he's got him shaking in interviews and drinking milk and all this shit, they also put in footage from movies he was acting in, where he is, the movie being The Man Who Fell to Earth, where he is
like drinking
in that and being mentally unstable in that, but it is acting. And I felt that was a bit disingenuous unless you knew what the source was. Because if you didn't know that's him in a film, you're just like, wow, David Bowie is
surrounded by gin,
surrounded by gin in his floating chain bed. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, they didn't show the scene where he had his dick out though, so that's probably good.
No hog action in this film.
No.
So
what are you gonna do?
I'm learning.
It's one of the advantages of The Man Who Fell to Earth. You see at least 2 different dicks.
Yeah, and so this is the conversation I was kind of getting at, because Alex and I keep saying like facts that you think might be present in a documentary. And Ron goes like, I didn't fucking know that shit. I'm like, well, why didn't they tell you in the documentary? It's 2 hours and 20 minutes.
True. It was very different in, I think, its purpose compared to, for example, like you and I, Jake, have both read that Bowie biography entitled Bowie.
Mark Spitz.
Yeah. And that's very much, presents facts. It presents like it's researched, and they found these stories from people, and it's presenting directly a story of a life and a career.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this movie, it's much more, you're kind of on the outside, and it's presenting it through these sound bites, through the songs, some implications there of the imagery, and then the interviews. But it's not digging into things, and it can't present anything in that format that it was like researched,
Right.
Because everything has to come from like a pre-recorded something or piece of archival footage.
Right. So do you think the film is lacking in maybe an angle, or do you think its angle is just something that isn't necessarily bolted down in the details, so to speak?
I think it's still telling a story, but it's not telling the whole story.
And what is that? What is the story then, Alex?
I think the story is the sort of philosophical evolution of the artist David Bowie.
David Bowie. Okay.
And that's, I think, what it's presenting the most of, because a lot of the interviews are him talking about how he feels about music and how he feels about art and life and love and stuff. And you can track those changing throughout the movie. From his, changing his music, the music style that he performs in. You can see from the live shows how his performance changes. You can see, like, he talks about love early on and says, like, oh no, I need to stay away from that, versus later on where he actually gets married.
Where we get the contrast where he marries Iman.
Yeah.
Last name I forget.
I think Mononymous?
Oh, maybe.
Jones, maybe? Huh?
Anonymous.
And like when he talks philosophically about like what he thinks about art and life, and even there's a bit in the middle where he's like, oh, I just want an audience, and like I wouldn't begrudge anyone for having an audience. And then later on where it kind of implies like, oh, he's not as fulfilled from that. So he's going back to kind of his roots, and maybe it plays a song from earlier on in the movie to show that he's returning to some of this earlier drive, things like that.
So it's really an attempt to get in the head of David Bowie. Is that kind of the?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so, or at least
that's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
Because I think the other part is we spend so much time in interviews, particularly, which not only gives us quotes from David Bowie, but it gives us the perspective of David Bowie to the public.
Yes.
Along with fan footage, where we see these fans freaking out and being like, "Oh, David Bowie, yeah, he's really fucking cool." Which was fun to see. Did you guys have any favorite fans from that film besides the crying girl?
No, the crying girl definitely stands out in my mind here. She's the main one here. I remember just kind of being blown away just at like how deep some people were kind of invested in this here. That you kind of see all these images of, I think from the past of, I think of Kiss basically, and you see images of all the fans going out to the shows and everybody's dressed up in the makeup. But I never expected to see people wearing the type of Bowie makeup like he does.
Especially like early on, when he wasn't as like massive.
Exactly.
But he still had a very dedicated following, right? And there was that one guy, I think he had lipstick on or something, maybe he had a dress, I don't remember, but he was it looks good. If it looks good, why wouldn't I wear it?
Oh, is that the guy who's like, oh, you don't have to be bent to wear makeup? Because that was another one.
He might have said that. I missed that one.
That was one of them. I thought that was pretty funny.
No, and I think that's a very progressive view, given the age of that type of footage in the first place, and I don't think that's a view that would be at all out of place in our society today,
Yeah, that's true. And we do see shots of Bowie in concert wearing his like dresses and kimonos and stuff.
Yeah.
He's like hyper androgynous through most of this movie. It's almost jarring to see him in his like blonde hair phase where he's just like a British man. Like,
He's like wearing a suit and like boxing.
Yeah. Unreal. Now, we did
not at the same time.
Touch on our like perception of the angle, at least Alex and I's. Ron, did you agree with sort of Alex's idea that this is attempting to explore the mind of David Bowie more so than the life facts of him?
I would definitely say so as well. The fact that we got so much interviews that were kind of, and like you said about the interviews earlier, that these are the public's perception and, cut by a interviewer, edited down to showcase certain parts as well here. We really get to kind of see what the perception of Bowie was here and kind of his thoughts about the ideas at the time here. I think when you become a famous icon like that here, you kind of get inundated with all these questions about the culture of the time here, about what you think society is going to be like here. And I think some of those questions being from Bowie really just shows his thoughts on how he kind of approached his fame, about being a presenter, about being somebody in the public eye like that. And I think it really does kind of showcase, like Alex said here, his evolution through the times and how his philosophy changed, but you can kind of see there's still a core underneath of his desire to explore underneath.
Right.
Yeah, it did a pretty good job of tying it all together in that way, right? Like even as his philosophy changed, the underlying curiosity and desire to create was consistent.
Yeah, I suppose there is, even as mysterious as Bowie is still, even after this documentary, you see how, forthcoming he is in interviews. He never really dodges a question. Like from that beginning one where he's decked out in the Ziggy Stardust gear and he's got the big platform boots on, and the guy's asking him questions, and he's like, "Well, is that women's clothing, men's clothing?" He's like, "Women's shoes, men's shoes." He's like, "They're shoes," and like, he's giving the most straightforward answers he can. He asks if he believes in God. He's like, "Well, I don't believe in it in that light." And then even in a later interview where this woman's like, "Well, so these characters you put on the Ziggy Stardust and that were just kind of ways to like communicate with us without being yourself," and he's like, "Well, yeah, kind of. I was always a part of it, but it was a bit of a mask." She's like, "So are we getting the real David Bowie right now?" And his response is, "Well, one wonders."
Yes. I do remember that scene in the movie, and I think that was very telling of Bowie's still creative process, and I think that even as open and forward as he is about some of about what his art and what he does, there's still some part of him that I think is underneath it all still that boy who can't express himself in words that other people feels he can they can understand him as well.
Yeah, the movie opens with some quote about him talking about time and how it is this like communication with something beyond understanding, this great unknowable, things like that. And that does seem to play throughout, whether he was 20 or 50, like that was still playing out in his life, this communication with something beyond his understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this does focus. It claims to focus on like his entire kind of creative lifespan, but the real focus is from like early 70s Ziggy Stardust to basically Let's Dance in
like mid 80s.
Mid 80s. Because we whipped through the 90s and the 2000s,
really
the 2010s.
Through the rest, yeah.
Just quick. Like, Andy got married, and here's some more albums came out, and fucking we're done.
Yeah, and like there's a bit of like Outside. No, like Black Tie White Noise, no Boot of Suburbia, a little bit of, what is it? What's the drum and bass one?
Earthling. We see the jacket from Earthling.
See the Earthling big Union Jack. And I don't think, were there any songs from like post 2000? I don't think so.
I think, so it opens
there
up
was
with
Black Star.
Medley.
Yeah,
there was Black Star in there. Which is a great segue for us to talk about the music in this film. So naturally, David Bowie has a massive catalog to draw from, and the mistake, like I talked about this flop film. Did any of you guys see Stardust?
No.
Kind of would like to at some point, but no. Did you see it?
It sounds like a trash heap. No, I haven't seen it. So it's funny because I didn't mention it in the intro, but they had to use just songs that David Bowie had covered during his like early years because their focus was on like his first like American tour or something. You guys, it's loosely similar to the Janis Joplin biopic plot in 30 Rock, where they can't get the rights to Janis Joplin, so they call her like Jackie Jorm Jomp, and do a biopic with that. Has that same kind of vibe, but they choose to focus on just like his early Ziggy Stardust, like the most like ask any bum off the street about David Bowie, they'll say Ziggy Stardust. That phase. I was excited to see in this that even though it only covered like a 20-year span, it was still not just that intro stuff. We get a pretty broad selection of Bowie hits in there.
True, yeah. There's a lot of like low.
Big low fan here.
And that was cool. One thing I did notice, and this kind of ties into something we said before about them glossing over some of the less savory aspects. There's almost no Thin White Duke.
Yeah. Yeah, barely a mention of like 76. Station to Station or anything, yeah.
But they do use a musical motif from it, which I thought was very effective.
Yeah. So that raises the question. 1, what do you think about the soundtrack overall? And 2, what were some highlights for y'all?
Alex, you need to think about this.
We're like, oh, who's going to talk first? Okay. Who's going to talk first? Do you have something in mind, Ronald?
I was kind of thinking as well here, especially since you guys are talking about like that sort of later half of Bowie here, where the movie kind of ended off at Let's Dance here. That's kind of where my Bowie music kind of stopped as well, and I hit a phase where whenever I'm sort of exploring an artist here, I'll collect enough albums that I enjoy, and then I just kind of stop.
Right.
And then like it's usually I don't try to branch out too much more into that artist until I see something like modern from them, which is like a really bad habit of mine. Just with listening to some older artists here, and I think that's kind of what I actually ended up falling really heavily into Black Star when it first came out.
Yeah.
Because I just really enjoyed just the different sound of it compared to everything else here.
Yeah, it's a very like dark, brooding album. It's very mysterious too. And just the timing of it is so wild. It makes an impactful album, regardless almost of the content on it.
Exactly. Like it's just like it's that like sort of last gasp of here's one last one before you go.
Mm-hmm.
But because of I think like the structure of where the movie kind of cut off its eras here, like I actually felt like I was pretty familiar with most of it. But in a sense, though, I know I'm missing that big chunk of Bowie history that I don't know anything about, and the fact that most of the movie were songs I recognized and could identify, and like only a few were ones that I wasn't super familiar with here. It kind of makes me feel like that they did skip out on a relatively large section of his life and career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the cutoff, and I think I understand it, because after Let's Dance, he releases basically his two worst albums, Tonight and Never Let Me Down, which I think both have some redeeming songs on them.
Yeah, they weren't really mentioned, like they didn't come up in this movie, but there was a brief clip from the Loving the Alien music video, which we talked about last February.
That's where it would have been last January, Alex.
Oh yeah, January, not February. February's Lover.
Yeah, so there was loose references to these albums existing. And given how much they focused on his like creative journey, it almost seems wasteful to not cover this era where he just was kind of trying to crank out pop music.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they're absent, and then he pulls away in the 90s. The 90s he releases Boot of Suburbia and Earthling. And then
that's all that comes up, and Outside Black Tie White Noise. Did you say that already?
Black Tie White Noise is 2000,
and,
I think.
Black Tie White Noise is early 90s.
Is it early 90s?
Yeah, 2000 was Ours, or 1999.
Right, 2000 is Ours. Yeah, Black Tie White Noise is like 91 or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we missed out on all of Tin Machine.
They do not mention Tin Machine, which is interesting.
Yeah, which is interesting not only because it is some like weird like grunge rock music, but it is him taking his name off of the music he presents. So it feels like there's a lot of intrigue, a lot of interesting stuff to delve into that time period. But I guess kind of like what you're saying, not really Ronald, they focused on the era that most people know the hits from, and I think there is some wisdom in that.
Yeah, and like
that's what people want to know about.
The thing about Tin Machine is they're not really well regarded. I do like them.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least some of it, but like generally speaking, I think a lot of people put them in a similar category to Never Let Me Down and Tonight. I think that's not fair, but I think
I don't think so.
Just because they're like, these are the not acclaimed ones that we can forget about.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, talking about standouts, I thought the interesting beginning where they mash up a bunch of tracks together at the start. And we just kind of like get some atmosphere. So you get like
kind of from across time.
Yeah, from across time. So you get Hello Space Boy in there, which is a 90s one. You get Life on Mars. You get Space Oddity.
I really like that they like open pretty much like the first footage of Bowie you see. They open with Wild Eyed Boy from Free Cloud. I think that's a good.
Yeah, I think that was a solid
way to present it.
And also great live version.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A musical thing that I really liked, and I alluded to this earlier, but they used the piano intro from Word on a Wing.
Oh yeah,
kind of 2 times, and I don't remember the exact time, but in terms of theming, I think the first time it would have had to have been when he was talking about love and how he wants to keep away from it. I don't remember if that was when it was, but if it was, it would have been perfect, because the second time is definitely when they're talking about his marriage to a man.
Mm-hmm.
I'm man. How do you pronounce that first vowel?
I think it's E.
E man?
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know. I really like that song and that piano intro. I was like, oh, there it is. And like it felt very nice.
Oh yeah, that's a tight one. That one's great. I love their back to back. They do sound and vision with like a little visualizer sequence, so it's like splotches of paint or something on the screen. and it's stripped down, so you get to hear how fucking bumping that bass line is. Boom, doom, 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 boom, 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 boom. You're like, oh hell yeah! And then that fades into A New Career in a New Town.
Yeah,
which is an all-timer Bowie song for me.
Yeah, that was a great transition.
Great transition. I'm a bit of a freak for that era. I really liked a lot of the live stuff they did.
I thought that was cool. And I know I talked to Ronald about this a little bit after we saw the movie, but I liked that they used a lot of live tracks when they could and showed him performing. I thought that was cool. Then you could, one, see his sort of evolution as a performer.
Right.
And also, to me, who's very familiar with the album versions, and less so with most of the live stuff, just felt like a little bit different. It felt like a slightly different perspective. And because it's live, it felt like a little more immediate. So you could kind of see the little differences and stuff.
It really does feel like a treat for the listener and a way to, again, expose another side of David Bowie, the performer. We see him in interviews. We see him in performance. Like, that's how you get the full image of him.
Yeah, I agree with that too, because I'm with you on that, Alex, and that most of my knowledge comes from album versions, and the few live versions I picked up, I actually on first cover hearing them and remembering, that other David Bowie biopic that came out recently, I thought, because I remember reading about how they had issues about licensing music, I thought they were related, so I thought some of these were even covers. Which is just wild, but after looking it up after, it's all live music, and it's really kind of refreshing to be able to get this glimpse into music that you would normally be able to find so casually as somebody listening to this, 20, 30, 40 years after the fact.
Yeah, there is, especially with live versions, something so precious about that, because it is just a singular performance that could have been lost to time. And I don't know how much of the footage in this is never before seen stuff, if a lot of it is the concert footage or if it's more interview based.
I recognized one from David Live because I know that live album, because he fucks up a word, says the lizards lay lying or something. And I was like, I know that line mistake. There is one version, there is one song that is not David Bowie performing it, that I noticed, and that is Michael C. Hall singing Absolute Beginners from the Lazarus musical.
From the Lazarus musical.
Which we did an episode on.
Yes, we did.
Just to shout that out. A year.
Bonus
and a bit
segment.
Oh, is it a bonus?
Yeah, we were reckless back then.
Oh, man. Okay.
I know. How did we ever get to where we are now? But yeah, so there is again, he has this huge multimedia background, and it extends to musicals. I was reading just on his Wikipedia page. Apparently, he wrote some songs for a SpongeBob musical.
I think
crazy.
Yeah, because he was a voice in SpongeBob, right? He was
because his daughter liked SpongeBob.
Something.
Yeah, I think it's Lord Royal Highness is literally the character's name.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Question for both of you, unless you had another comment on that.
No, bring it in, Alex.
Oh my gosh, I totally blanked on what my question was.
Okay.
Nope, I got it. Okay, it came back. There's a lot of footage of David Bowie walking in places.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
Well, his hair's blonde in it, right? Really bleached blonde, so it's got to be mid 80s.
Yeah. There's a bit of him in, I think, I didn't know where. I'm going to guess Bali, because I know he liked Bali.
Yeah, Bali.
To the point where that's where his ashes were scattered.
Japan is, I think, a lot of it, that nighttime footage where he's going up and down escalators a lot. I think that's Japan. I think the daytime stuff is Bali.
When? Well, did he just film that?
And why? What? I mean, I liked seeing it.
I mean, it looked really cool because it was these neon lights and there were a bunch of reflections, so you could see kind of him from different angles and stuff. Or they were actually literally just reflecting things and doing effects. I don't remember. It looked cool, but it was what? Is this from a movie he did? Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Ron. Do you have any idea where that footage came from?
No, and there was a part of me that was on some of those shots initially, because I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to a lot of these things here.
Right.
When they're showing shots of just Bowie walking, like from behind. Part of me was even just like, did they just hire an actor and just like, just made the back look like it, and they're walking around to fill imagery while they're, doing the voiceover for whatever he's saying. But at the same time here, the few times you did end up seeing his face in those clips here, in my mind, it definitely looked like him. So,
yeah, unless it was like a really good AI or something.
I mean, deepfakes are very real these days, but would it have been so far out of the mind to imagine that he did just hire videographers to record him walking around every so often? In my mind, like, no, but would he? Who's to say, right?
Yeah, and like if anyone had cameras just like with him, I feel like if David Bowie in the 80s. And there's so much archival stuff allegedly to dig through that maybe that's just that's just his home videos. That's what David Jones's home videos look like.
Yeah, maybe he's got Duncan Jones holding the camera.
Yeah,
it's his first
his directorial debut.
Yeah.
David Bowie on stairs.
Yeah, those moments did stand out though because they were so odd. And it did kind of look like vacation footage or something. You see him on a boat, and you're just like, well, there's some British dude having a vacation. Like,
yep. Wearing like a lot of really like light clothing and a hat.
Yeah. What a strange phenomenon. Yeah. I guess we've already kind of touched on this, but what were some of your all like key takeaways from this? What did you come out feeling like you now know?
I think the big thing for me is it really is just knowing the extent of just how much more Bowie has done here, and his idea of when he was talking about, how he wants to do something, he wants to leave his mark on it, and then once he's done that, we're done. We move on to the next thing here. I think that's I guess I don't think I could ever do something like that, and in a sense, I guess I kind of admire that bit of philosophy here, and it makes me want to kind of explore a lot more of the rest of his art, basically.
Yeah, I think it definitely sheds a different perspective on it. And you can, appreciate what he's doing a little more, seeing just even a glimpse into what his thought process is like.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, you got any hot takes?
Yeah, I don't know about hot takes. I would say my big takeaway is that, and maybe this is just on me, but I feel like I already had a pretty good conceptualization of the sort of philosophical evolution of David Bowie. This filled in some more details, but I feel this is like confirmation of like, yeah, I think I had a pretty good idea of what this was generally. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
But at the same time, sorry, I should have, not to interject after I should have said it, but like part of that just may be like kind of a confirmation bias thing of like, this is what I think, and now I'm picking out the details that confirm what I already believed. But I do think that where the film landed is similar to kind of where I would have landed.
Yeah, and
or where
given
I have
how
landed.
it doesn't deal with like in 1976 David Bowie played here at the Hammersmith Odeon or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it is more loosely structured. There is a lot of room to get your own takeaway from it. Say like, okay, this is how I can now understand David Bowie, hearing David Bowie's words and watching him perform in some live settings and go on vacation or something. And seeing his fans.
And I think in a sense that's a lot better and more what David Bowie himself would have wanted than, somebody interpreting what he's done and then doing a voiceover of it all, and that other kind of documentary style that we were talking about here. I just don't think that would really fit his vision of what a movie about his life arguably would be about.
Yeah, it's he's like, even when he talks about his music, and we've talked about this on previous episodes, but he really likes to hear people's interpretations of his songs. Mm-hmm. He's like, well, when I wrote it, I had this in mind, but a lot of people say, oh, I got this or this. He's like, and that's very cool and exciting. He's like, and that's like a great thing. Whereas some people will be like, no, it's about this. It's like, it's concrete. So even with his own work, he wasn't all about this like concrete structure. So to have a documentary that mirrors that style is, I think thematically appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Would you guys do anything differently? You're given access to 5 million archival Bowie items and his soundtrack. What do you do differently from Brett Morgen?
Fail to deliver.
Yeah, I die when I get that heart attack.
Yeah, heart attack takes me out, and yeah. Assuming that I'm like a semi-capable documentarian, which I am not, I would say a little more spread out, a little more slightly later, like stuff from the 90s and maybe later, as well, if such a thing even exists.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you can do a 3-hour doc. Chuck an extra 40 minutes on there, give us the rest of the 80s up to death.
And maybe some of the more negative stuff that was glossed over. But I think it works. Because it does. I thought it told a story successfully without those. Because really the conflict, and maybe that was why it was cut, was because the conflict is sort of his own internal drive leading him astray.
Right.
Briefly, and then him coming back and realizing how to like enjoy life kind of thing more.
Right, so how do you depict that?
Yeah. So maybe it was just too much. It was like, and then he was down in this part, and then he was up, and then he was down again. And he was up, and it's like, well, that's a life, but it's not a movie.
Yeah, that's true. So, and you get the thesis statement of like he went through some phases. Apply that to the next 30 years too. Like,
yeah, it's phases all the way down. It's fractal. The closer you look, the more there is.
The more there is. That's fair. Yeah, I'd like to say that I did like some of the kind of winking to Bowie fan structure where it was like, hey, here's live footage of him doing Let's Dance where he does a little boxing in his live performance. You go, hey, I know about that because I'm a little Bowie freak. But I think in terms of like getting people in on like a factual level, yeah, maybe expand just a touch on like some of these things to make it a little more explicit so that somebody comes away and doesn't just go like, wow, David Bowie's very cool. But also, like, I have an idea of, like, some things he was going through beyond just being very cool and changing how he was
and,
cool
like,
throughout the years.
Thinking about stuff a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a sense that whenever you talk about, I think, famous people posthumously like this as well, you kind of gloss over the negative aspects, kind of like this movie was doing, and I think a little bit more time spent on that. Even, like, if you don't dedicate the same kind of feeling that the rest of the film has had towards that kind of stuff, if you take a bit more of a serious tone and like I don't want to say like switch into that kind of more like classic narrator documentary style here, but when it comes to that kind of stuff here, I think it might fit better than just, you know, watching somebody through actually their actions and effects through those periods.
Yeah, I think you could even do it in the style they kind of did things here. Because they do the series of shots of him like drinking and boozing or whatever. Like there's the implied like discord in his life, and then there's factors about him in his later life. He gets tattooed on himself the what is it, the temperance poem or whatever. Lord, give me the strength to do the one thing, the wisdom to this, and the smarts to know the difference or whatever. He got that tattooed on his leg in Japanese.
Okay.
So like you could shoot to that, have the translation of it, and then like if there was footage of that, like there's ways to like show us that he was like heavy into drugs and then boom, like he got through that. We don't need to know necessarily the story in between, but you give us point A and point B, or like point C rather, we can kind of fill in point B.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess if our complaint is we want more though, like
yeah, I guess
more details.
An actual complaint I guess I had, and maybe just something I might have done differently, I didn't really appreciate all the visualizer moments where they kind of just did splashes of artwork and animations on screen while they played music or overlaid an interview.
Yeah.
I think in the instances, like when they were doing music, I think what else are you gonna do? Like, and that's fine, but in the instances where I think they were still kind of talking about Bowie and like his interviews and what his thoughts were, sometimes the music would get in the way of basically trying to pick out his words.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is just me personally, maybe it's just like as somebody who never really watched a lot of his older interviews and may not recognize his footage before here, but I would have just appreciated more interview footage of that. Even if it's just like him talking. I think that on its own would have been enough for me and a bit more enjoyable than seeing all this like kind of animated footage on top of him speaking.
Yeah, sometimes it felt like the documentary wanted to be a music video, like a 2.5 hour music video rather than a documentary. I agree.
And at times it kind of was. I do feel like there was maybe an intention there, and to me it felt like, especially at times when they were trying to show some chaos or discord in his life, it was more likely to have a lot of audio layered on top of each other. But it did make it difficult to follow some of the interviews.
Yes, and that could 100% be a thematic choice from the director to showcase that discord here, but in a sense here, as somebody who may not have been aware of that type of discord there, just kind of seeing the bits and pieces of it here, it kind of just gets in the way of the film, I feel, instead of being a sort of little wink to go, oh yes. But I guess if you guys interpret it that way, though, like as I think bigger Bowie fans than me, you definitely have a little bit more interpretation out of that style.
Yeah, it's I don't know if bigger. I heard a term for different types of fans. There's like prescriptive fans, which is like having the knowledge base and like knowing the facts. It's like real Star Wars fans, where they're like, in this year it was Han who shot first, but then it became Greedo, and you're like, well, great, you're a bigger fan than me, I guess. And then there's the more just like straight emotional or like fulfillment fan base, where it's like, I listen to David Bowie's music and it makes me feel good. And I don't think either way is necessarily wrong.
That's fair. Let's turn back and say you guys know more about Bowie than I do.
Yeah, we got a little more of the facts down. But even with that, I still agree, because now I'm remembering these parts where it was like, here's interview audio, and here's whatever Bowie song screaming over top, and I'm like, well, now I just have to disengage because I can't fucking hear what the interview is. And that's ultimately what I'm here for. I can hear Bowie's music when I go home, or even when I just leave the theater. Like, I can't hear these interviews everywhere. So give me that, prioritize that, and then, play the music at more appropriate moments. I agree. Any final thoughts here? We're going to kind of give a final verdict, whether we think people should see the movie or not. Let's give it a yes or no. We don't need like a 5 stars.
I would still give it a yes. I think it's just a good time here. The length is always a little bit up there, and as somebody who, like, I've only started getting into movies, I want to say, within the last few years or so. Movies above 2 hours in length are still always in my mind just a little bit of a, do I have the time to commit to this here? Despite despite what Alex said earlier, I completely agree. You give me 6 30-minute episodes and I will slam those down. But 2 hours, 15 minutes, well, when you say it like that.
Yeah, it's hard to commit to that.
But I would still ultimately recommend this movie even for somebody who has just a interest in Bowie or has heard his music before but may not know much about him. I think this is actually a really good introduction into his life, his philosophy, and just a glimpse into what else he's done before.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it paints him as quite a compelling character, and you get a good selection of his music, which of course was his predominant output. I forgot to mention it throughout the episode, but what I thought was really cool was seeing some of his paintings on screen. I thought was a big moment for me. I had never seen any of them before. I knew he liked paintings. I wasn't even sure if I knew he did paint. I knew he bought art and things, but yeah, to see actual works from him was very cool. Yeah. So I think you're right. Everybody can grab something out of this, and if you have a passing interest in Bowie, or if you're a huge Bowie head, you're probably going to enjoy 2 hours of Bowie music. So, hey. Alex, what do you think?
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I give it a yes as well. Definitely worth checking out. I would say if you're not really a Bowie fan, maybe not. Like, if you're not curious about it at all, I don't think it's going to convert you. But, like, if you're a bit curious or you are a fan, definitely I'd say it's worth seeing. I mean, I would spend 2+ hours listening to David Bowie music anyway. So, like, the fact that there's some other stuff going on at the same time, like, yeah, fine. I also liked that other stuff, but, just wouldn't have to be. And I thought there were some cool mixes of songs.
Yeah, it's Tony Visconti doing the production on this.
Yeah, music, so some cool stuff. We mentioned some cool live stuff that I didn't know. We talked about that one transition there. There was another thing. They put out the version of Modern Love from this as a single, and I was kind of like, what? I wasn't impressed. But like once you see it in the movie, it's like, okay, it makes sense. It builds. Sense, yeah. Cool. I get it. I'm into it now. So yeah, check it out.
Did you guys stick around to the end of the credits?
Yes, we did.
Hell yeah. Yeah. And he says he calls you very lovely and very interesting at the end.
Yeah, and I thought that was like nice, in a sense, like it's clear that was directed towards like an interviewer who's been asking questions the entire time. But I think that's very showing of Bowie's personality and like kind of his, not like the word I want to use is not capricious, but it's like his carefreeness when it comes to that kind of stuff, where he will just say what's on his mind here. There was one, I think, an instance earlier on when an interviewer asked him the question, and he just drops a "No shit, Sherlock."
That's right.
And I thought that was just so crazy because that's something like I would expect, people our age to be using, not something I'd expect to hear in interview footage from, what is that, like 50 years ago at this point?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just like, it's just that like little bit of, I don't know, like
humanity?
A little bit of, yeah, I guess like humanity is a good sense of seeing it. It's that idea of just like, he doesn't have the time for dumbass questions like that. Like, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah.
I think that's just it's a very like kind of real glimpse into behind it all, behind everything, behind maybe that mask we still, I wonder maybe there's still a mask underneath. There's still that sense of when we're all faced with that dumbass question, we're like, really? Really, dude?
Yeah. Ultimately, he is just a dude at the end of the day, despite how phenomenal he is. Yeah, and that is a good highlighting moment of that. Excellent. So that does it for our main segment. If you've been listening, you got a different opinion, similar opinion, want to talk about some aspect we didn't talk about, hit us up on Twitter, #CoverMePod, @JakeTheCressy, @SomeAlexWiseGuy. Send us comments, questions, concerns, suggestions for future episodes. You can also email us at covermepod@gmail.com. Be sure to rate and review us. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, your favorite podcasting app. Give us a 5 stars on Spotify, you rats, and then send us mean words by email if you don't actually like us. We just need the ratings, man. You are the marketing budget, so tell your friends about us, tell your enemies, tell your loved ones, tell your coworkers, tell anyone, because that's how we get more people listening. And today, since we have a guest, we have a bonus segment. Yeah, hooray!
Bonus!
What?
So this was very tough to do, and I think Alex still might clean up on this, but it's a quiz. It is I'm calling it Bowie's B-sides. So as we all know, when you release a single, you have an A-side, which is the popular song, and then the B-side, which is kind of like the album cut that they tuck it along in there to get a little extra traction. So I'm going to tell you a B-side, and you have to tell me what you believe the A-side to be.
Okay.
For Bowie tracks.
That's tricky.
All right. Tricky. It is tricky. I tried to be, without giving too much away, like the answers are obvious, kind of.
Okay.
So the first one I'll give you is, that was tough actually. Let's go with the first one. Wild-Eyed Boy from Free Cloud is the B-side. What is the A-side?
The A-side, I want to say, is Space Oddity.
Alex, what do you think?
Kind of also think it's Space Oddity.
Are you both locking in Space Oddity?
Yeah. Let me think a second. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Yes, that's correct. It is Space Oddity. So that's the easy one. That's a point for both of you, and that's a bit. You don't have to think too hard about these.
Okay.
Some of them you might, because here's the next one. The Man Who Sold the World is the B-side.
Oh, I feel like we talked about this on the episode, I'm sure. But I don't remember.
It's like I have a rough idea of like the early Bowie albums, and like I recognize these names, but I'm just like, that is a song I like listening from that album, so
I'll give you guys both a hint. Not from the same album. The A-side is not from the same album.
Okay.
Now, do we go earlier or later? Let's think about this. No, can't think about this too much. Yeah. All right. The Man Who Sold the World is the B-side. So the A-side is, I don't know, Changes.
I want to throw Let's Dance for some reason, but I don't know why. That's just sticking on. Let's say it.
Okay. All right. You were both incorrect. The correct answer is Life on Mars.
Yeah.
Yeah, right in between you guys there.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Okay, our next one here is, let's see, we've got V2 Schneider is the B-side. That is V2 Schneider as the B-side.
Yeah, you
Kind
know
of
how
heroes
earlier I
then,
mentioned
right?
that part of Bowie that I'm not familiar with? Yeah, I think we're right in that section.
I will
right
let
now,
you know, all of these singles are from within the time span covered in the film.
Oh, god damn it. Now I have to actually think about it.
Just
That's
V2
not-
Schneider, right?
Just V2 Schneider as the B-side.
It's gotta be Heroes. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm going to take the safe guess, and I'm going to guess with Alex as well.
That is a safe bet. It is Heroes. That is
Okay.
correct. Okay, next up,
All right.
we have Andy Warhol as the B-side. That is Andy
Oh.
Warhol as the B-side.
Oh. Okay.
Well, I'll keep an eye. You guys are tied right now. It is 2 for 2.
Oh. Oh, you pretty things.
All right,
That's
we got
my
Oh, You Pretty Things from Ronald.
second guess, but I'm gonna say Changes again.
Alex, you are correct. It is Changes. It's Change. So, Alex, you've taken the lead here. 3 to 2. Next up, we got an interesting one. This is due to the way that, singles were released back in the day. Sometimes America would have a different B-side or even a different A-side than other parts of the world. British. So this one is either Knock on Wood or Suffragette City as your B-side.
Oh, jeez.
Knock
That's
on
the
Wood or
B-side.
Suffragette City as
Whoa.
the B-side.
That's spaced out, man.
I'm going to go with Starman.
That's a good guess.
Starman's my guess. Starman
Just to
fits
spread it
theme
out.
Spaced out.
Spread it out. I'm gonna say 5 years.
Okay, interesting. Young Americans.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Unexpected.
Okay, all right.
Unexpected.
Completely unexpected.
I was definitely expecting another Ziggy Stardust song.
I know, I'm sticking within the albums, but I think that's the downside here.
Yeah, well, some of them are, and then, you get weird ones like that.
Yeah.
So this next one, I'm going to bet is outside of your realm of knowledge here, but it should be within it. We got Fantastic Voyage as the B-side. It's Fantastic Voyage
Is the B side.
as the B-side.
I think you're right about this being outside my realm of knowledge.
It's only kind of in my realm, and it should be more, but
Well, I'm a big Lodger fan. But is it also on Lodger?
I might just take a pass on this. I'm good. I've got nothing I can say that I think will be correct here.
pick something wild. Pick the weirdest David Bowie song you know.
Alright. Okay. Tis a pity she's a whore.
Hey, it's not that. I'll tell you that.
I'm gonna go just because it's in the movie, DJ.
Oh, good guess. It's Boys Keep Swinging from the same album. And the final one here, B-side is A New Career in a New Town.
What
a great B-side that is.
I hope it's Sound and Vision.
Alex has said Sound and Vision. Ronald, what do you got?
What was from that era? I'm gonna take the safe guess again. I'm gonna take Alex's guess.
That's correct. It's Sound and Vision.
Vision.
So Alex, you beat out Ronald by 1 point.
One. That was a tricky one.
It's
Arguably
tricky.
3.
3, yeah, because you just stole guesses, but
Maybe half points, you know? You're like,
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
for me. And all that.
but it was a safe bet to bet on Alex's knowledge. That's a good way to work it.
That Young Americans one was a curveball, though.
That definitely
Right?
was.
Yeah.
I didn't even know we had a song called Knock on Wood. I was like,
It's covered.
oh, okay, that makes sense.
It's either on pinups or just live on David Live.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for the bonus segment. Ronald, thanks so much for coming on today. Do you have anything you want to promote?
No, I'm good. The one thing I want to promote is your podcast. Cover Me. Come on, get out there, everybody. Comment, like, get your metrics in.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Ronald. Hopefully we'll get you on again sometime soon.
We got a Bowie month coming up.
We got a Bowie month coming up, so if you want to hop on it.
yeah, I'd love to be on again here. If you guys ever want to chat about Radiohead, hit me up.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, we haven't done Radiohead
yet on the
yeah.
show, so that would be perfect.
We should.
All right, yeah, let me know.
We will. That does it for today's episode of Cover Me, and as we always say on Cover Me in a Moonage Daydream. Oh, yeah.
Should I say that as well? Cover me in a Moonage Daydream. Oh yeah.